Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission is to take these complex geopolitical situations, cut through all the noise, and really distill them into the most critical information for you. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen an incredibly intense and, well, deeply consequential series of events unfolding across the Horn of Africa.
And particularly centered on Somalia.
Exactly. We're going to be dissecting this convergence of internal security campaigns and these profound diplomatic ruptures.
Right.
Our goal today is just to impartially deliver the facts, present the key perspectives from all sides, and then analyze potential future courses of action. We want to make sure you're well informed, but without, generating any alarm.
And this is, it's a textbook example of an internal conflict meeting external geopolitical maneuvering.
Absolutely.
The sources we've synthesized show just this enormous simultaneous pressure being placed on Somalia's sovereignty and because of that, on the broader stability of the whole East African region.
This deep dive is supported by ProWave AI, the global leader in strategic predictive modeling.
And crucially, the analysis you're about to hear is powered by Stylo News.
Right, the AI-powered news application. And the reason we bring this up is pretty simple. Stylo News is the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software,
Which is traditionally engineered for enterprise operations. So we're talking governments, military strategists, major international businesses.
Exactly. They use this technology to support their global decision-making. So you are getting access to a tool that's really designed for strategic intelligence. It synthesizes hundreds of sources, social media, all of it, instantly. Giving you a level of insight that, well, few others have.
So our deep dive has tracked the coverage across, I think it was over 250 global sources and more than 20 languages. And we focused on Somalia over the last couple of weeks.
And two patterns emerged.
Two major patterns simultaneously. First, the intense internal security campaign against Al-Shabaab. And second, a really severe international diplomatic crisis. And that's all centered on the question of Somalia's territorial integrity.
Okay, let's unpack this dual crisis, maybe starting with the security front. That dictates the reality for most Somalis on the ground.
Of course. The federal government of Somalia's forces, often supported, by international partners and U.S. airstrikes, they have reported some significant tactical successes recently.
That's a key distinction you made there, tactical versus strategic.
It is. Tactically, they've been highly effective. In central Somalia, for instance, operations led to the reported killing of 29 Al-Shabaab militants in Jabad Godain.
And what about leadership? Because taking out key figures can really degrade a group's capacity.
Absolutely, and that's where they've had more impact. We have reports confirming the elimination of the group's chief bomb maker in Jalib.
What?
And on top of that, a senior leader, a man named Abdullah Osman. He managed both explosive logistics and the group's media operations.
So propaganda and recruitment, a critical role.
A very critical role. He was also eliminated near Jalib. And then, the ground-level confirmation of all this is securing territory. And Somali forces did secure Jalib Marka in Lower Shabelle.
Securing Jalib Marka is vital. That restores some sense of order for local communities who've been living under Al-Shabaab's violent coercion for so long.
It does.
But despite these confirmed gains, what's the current strategic threat level facing the capital, Mogadishu?
Well, the underlying threat remains persistent and, frankly, existential. While the counterterrorism successes are real, the momentum just hasn't been sufficient to dislodge the group entirely.
I see.
We have reports indicating that militant forces are right now surrounding Mogadishu, keeping the federal government perpetually pinned down.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing the U.S. step up its operations.
Exactly. This is why U.S. Africa Command has had to intensify its kinetic operations, conducting multiple airstrikes against Al-Shabaab affiliates just to prevent a major collapse of federal authority.
It's hard enough to fight an entrenched, resilient internal enemy like that, but the timing of this diplomatic storm seems, well, truly crippling.
It's the worst possible timing.
So let's pivot to that. The international flashpoint that erupted even as the fighting continued. Somalia assumed the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council on January 1st, 2026.
Right. And that move itself was met with immediate criticism, given Somalia's, internationally recognized status as a fragile state.
The irony is pretty stark.
It is. Holding a position of global diplomatic authority while struggling to even control your own capital.
But the real sovereignty crisis, the one that really set things off, was when Israel formally recognized Somaliland as an independent state. That was in late December 2025.
And that was the first such recognition by any UN member state. It immediately drew widespread, very passionate condemnation across the whole region and beyond.
So how did Somalia's government react?
The recognition of Somaliland has been labeled an illegal incursion and a profound threat by Somalia's federal government. The African Union and the Arab League have also joined in condemning the move.
And they see it as a threat not just to Somalia, right, but to the entire continent's order.
Precisely. For the AU, this challenges a fundamental principle, the inviolability of colonial era borders.
Even though those borders were often drawn arbitrarily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But challenging them now just opens a Pandora's box. If one entity like Somaliland is recognized by an external actor, it risks emboldening dozens of other groups across Africa seeking similar secession,
Which could lead to
continent-wide fragmentation and decades of new conflict. That's the deep fear driving the AU's really strong language here.
that context is vital. So what does this perfect storm, this mix of internal success and external crisis, what does it mean for people on the ground? Let's look at the local and national impacts.
At the local level, that dichotomy we mentioned just continues. So successful operations like securing Julib Marca, they provide temporary relief.
It's fragile.
Very fragile, and
Yeah.
that was immediately underscored by a high-profile diplomatic disruption. A planned visit by the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, was abruptly canceled due to security lockdowns in Mogadishu. So that single event disrupted commerce, local life, everything across the capital, just demonstrating how precarious the situation still is.
And compounding all this instability is a devastating blow on the humanitarian front.
Yes, the U.S. State Department suspended all food aid programs to Somalia.
All of them. If the U.S. is a primary donor, how does the government maintain any legitimacy with the very population it's trying to win over from Al-Shabaab?
Well, that's the central governance crisis, isn't it? The suspension was due to serious allegations of aid theft and corruption by Somali officials.
So the government's capacity to manage its humanitarian challenges is being completely undermined by its own governance challenges.
Exactly. And the local population suffers acutely, which just exacerbates their vulnerability and could potentially drive desperate people right back toward the influence of militant groups.
Now, looking at the national stability implications of the Somaliland recognition, we've seen an immediate ripple effect internally.
Yes. The Israeli recognition, it risks emboldening other separatist movements. We've already seen that key regional states, Puntland and Jubaland, have suspended their ties with Mogadishu.
Which just complicates national unity efforts at the worst possible moment.
The very moment the federal government needs maximum internal cohesion.
And how has Mogadishu responded? Have they asserted their authority forcefully?
They have. The federal government annulled all agreements with the United Arab Emirates. That includes security cooperation and port operations.
Based on what?
On allegations that the UAE was supporting Somaliland's independence efforts.
That's a major act of defiance. The UAE had extensive investments there.
Huge investments, including running the crucial Berbera port in Somaliland. But Somalia views this as a necessary zero-tolerance measure to protect its sovereignty. They're basically saying the cost of interference is the complete withdrawal of economic cooperation.
We also have a fascinating, though deeply disturbing detail that links this conflict directly to Western financial systems.
The Minnesota connection.
Right. U.S. officials revealed fraudulent funds originating from the Somali community in Minnesota are being funneled directly to Al-Shabaab.
And what's really fascinating here is the transnational chain. Our sources indicate the money doesn't just fund operations in Somalia, it eventually reaches Iran via Yemen's Houthis.
Which underscores a chilling complexity. Terror financing laundered through global crime channels using a diaspora community as a source of funds.
That's right. It ends up supporting groups hostile to the United States and its allies.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ripples of instability, they're extending far beyond Somalia's borders, aren't they? They're affecting regional economic dynamics.
Absolutely. While Somalia is consumed with its own survival, its neighbors are advancing their own strategic economic goals. It's almost as if they're hedging against long-term instability in the Red Sea corridor.
For example?
Well, Kenya is strengthening economic ties with Malaysia, specifically focusing on the halal and palm oil sectors.
And Tanzania.
Tanzania is doubling down on infrastructure investments in its central corridor. We're talking railways and roads, specifically aiming to position itself as a major competing regional logistics hub.
So a direct competitor to Kenya. Is this push a direct reflection of declining confidence and stability near the Bab el-Mandab Strait?
It certainly suggests that strategic players recognize that long-term risk. They're diversifying their logistical reliance away from the unpredictable northern routes and trying to solidify routes through their own more stable territory.
So instability in Somalia translates directly into capital flowing to its neighbors.
That's what it looks like.
And finally, we have a completely unpredictable non-political concern adding immense stress to the region.
The earthquake warning.
Yes, a Dutch seismologist issued an urgent warning of potential strong earthquakes, maybe magnitude 6 or 7 plus, in Ethiopia and the surrounding East African Rift Valley.
And this raises a really important point. In a stable country, a natural disaster is a tragedy. In a fragile state like Somalia, or the areas around it, a major earthquake would be an existential governance challenge.
It would require diverting already stretched resources.
Resources needed for counterterrorism. It would create massive humanitarian demands that donors have already put conditions on. It's a huge underlying risk factor that you just can't ignore.
This analysis really highlights the deep contradictions facing the region. So for the key decision makers caught in this, what are their current strategies, their priorities?
We've identified several key players, and, well, they're very divergent courses of action. The Somali federal government's approach is clearly to assert sovereignty.
Right.
They're emphasizing national unity, condemning the Israeli and UAE actions as illegal incursions, and they're trying to leverage their UN Security Council presidency to advocate for international law.
Their diplomacy is a fight for survival.
For institutional survival, yes. Conversely, Israel's course of action is centered on strategic presence. They justify the recognition of Somaliland as a strategic partnership to expand influence near the critical Bab el-Mandab Strait.
And to counter the growing threat from the Houthis in Yemen.
That's a big part of it. Then you have the African Union, whose position is simply to uphold stability. They're reaffirming unwavering support for Somalia's territorial integrity and firmly rejecting the Somaliland recognition.
But let's be blunt here. While the AU supports Somalia's sovereignty in principle, doesn't Mogadishu's persistent internal instability, the corruption, the aid suspension, doesn't that make the concept of sovereignty feel more theoretical than practical to someone like Israel?
That's the critical tension. You've hit it exactly. The AU upholds the legal principle regardless of the on-the-ground reality, because the alternative legitimizing secession based on internal weakness is seen as far more dangerous for the continent.
Whereas Israel,
operating from a national security perspective, is clearly prioritizing geopolitical advantage over that institutional principle.
we also have to account for Yemen's Ansar Allah, the Houthis. Their course of action is one of conflict escalation.
Right. They have declared any Israeli presence in Somaliland a legitimate military target. This just raises the risk of direct conflict that could severely impact Red Sea shipping lanes, which are already highly stressed.
And finally, the United States. It seems to be sending mixed signals.
Deeply nuanced. On one hand, kinetic military operations against Al-Shabaab continue. On the other, non-military aid is being suspended due to governance failures.
And the most complicated part.
The most complicated part is that while the U.S. maintains its traditional policy of recognizing Somaliland as part of Somalia, it has also expressed support for Israel's decision. It's trying to balance its alliance with Israel against its traditional support for AU principles.
If we look at the source material itself, we see these different narratives playing out.
Absolutely. Sources emphasizing the counterterrorism successes and the Somali government's perspective, those include outlets like Kama Press and the Shabelle Media Network.
And on the other side,
conversely, sources critical of the geopolitical destabilization, like Alarm Weekly and the Daily Maverick, they analyze the recognition controversy with deep caution, really highlighting the risk of regional spillover.
we also saw Breitbart News presenting a very critical view of Somalia's UN presidency, basically highlighting its failed state status as a reason it lacks legitimacy for the role.
Right.
But what's fascinating, despite all these different focuses, is that there seems to be a broad common viewpoint.
There's a broad international consensus from the AU, the UN, IGAD, the EU, all urging dialogue between Mogadishu and Hargeisa and adhering to the principle of Somalia's territorial integrity to prevent regional instability.
Okay.
That consensus is the diplomatic baseline.
So that sets the stage for what we need to watch for. Let's look forward. What are the key developments for our listeners to monitor in the coming weeks?
Okay, first and most immediately, watch for the scheduled diplomatic visit by the Somaliland president to Jerusalem.
And if that visit solidifies the relationship,
It will almost certainly provoke an intense reaction from the African Union and the Arab League.
So we should also monitor their efforts to counter this. We'll be looking for potential diplomatic resolutions or even sanctions.
Exactly. On the financial front, the U.S. Treasury is expected to expand its anti-fraud investigations beyond Minnesota, trying to sever that critical terror financing artery.
Internally, attention has to be paid to the ongoing negotiations between Mogadishu and those member states, Puntland and Jubaland. The federal government desperately needs them back in the fold.
For any semblance of national unity, yes. And finally, we have to watch Somalia's high-profile moment in the UN Security Council. It's chairing a debate on international rule of law scheduled for January 26th.
A critical test of its ability to lead a global discussion while managing an existential crisis at home.
Precisely.
This deep dive is all about getting unique, synthesized intelligence, and that's exactly what Stylo News provides. It's intelligence designed for global decision makers, but now it's available to you.
That's right. Stylo News isn't just for governments. It's a mobile and computer app that you can download today. You can customize it for your own personal intelligence-style briefs, pulling data instantly from hundreds of traditional news sources and platforms like X.
And the platform is powered by the same cutting-edge AI engine we used for this deep dive. It uses advanced tech like the Stylo Vector Engine and Retrieval Augmented Generation to give you concise, source-linked answers in under 1 second.
It's personalized intelligence on demand, delivered with the speed and thoroughness that professionals rely on. We really urge you to subscribe to Stylo News. You can get that AI-powered news instantly. Just visit www.stylonews.com to start your trial today.
And that brings us to the close of this analysis. Thank you so much for joining us for this crucial deep dive into the complex dynamics of East Africa.
If you take one idea forward with you, maybe consider this. Israel's recognition of Somaliland, coupled with the Houthi declaration of military targets in the Red Sea corridor, it fundamentally shifts this major global trade artery from just a persistent geopolitical challenge to a volatile potential military flashpoint that is going to demand global attention.
Request your topic for a future deep dive and be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. Until next time.